There's this quote that really sticks with you. Science has been doing archaeology in each field separately, finding shards of the same object and arguing about what each shard means. I mean, just think about that. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, the folks studying the tiniest viruses and the ones mapping out the entire cosmos are actually looking at the very same thing, just different pieces of it, and they don't even know it.
So today, we are diving deep into a really wild theory that could stitch all those pieces together. It's called pressure geometry. And the big idea here is that there's a single one-size-fits-all law that governs, well, everything.
For hundreds of years, we've kind of built these walls between the sciences, right? You've got physics over here with its laws, biology over there with its own rules, and so on. But what if those walls have been blocking our view? What if we've been so busy staring at our own little shard that we've completely missed the big picture that connects it all? And that really brings us to the core question of all this. Is the force that meticulously builds a tiny virus fundamentally different from the one that spins an entire galaxy? I mean, it sounds kind of crazy at first. The scales are just mind-bogglingly different. But this theory of pressure geometry says nope. The underlying blueprint isn't just similar, it's exactly the same.
Okay, so if there really is a universal blueprint, what in the world is it? Well, pressure geometry says that everything we see, from the absolute smallest thing to the absolute biggest, is all just a different expression of one single underlying pattern. So let's unpack that. The key idea we need to get our heads around is something called universality. It's actually a pretty cool concept. Think about snowflakes. They all look different, right? But they all share that same fundamental six-sided shape. That's because of the underlying symmetry of how water molecules freeze. Well, pressure geometry basically says the entire universe does the exact same thing, just with a much, much deeper kind of symmetry. And that's where the name comes from. The fundamental pattern is called pressure geometry. The idea is that reality isn't really about particles or energy at its deepest level. Instead, it's all about the shape, the geometry of pressure itself. This constant push and pull that's happening everywhere at every scale, all the time. Now, this perfect geometry of pressure is described by a really beautiful mathematical object called E8. And don't worry, we are not going to get lost in the math here. The best way to think about E8 is to picture a soap bubble. A soap bubble always forms a perfect sphere, right? That's because a sphere is the most stable, most energy-efficient shape to hold the pressure of the air inside. E8 is like the ultimate cosmic version of that, the absolute most perfect, most stable shape for pressure to exist in. But here's the catch, and this is super important. We don't always see this perfect E8 pattern just lying around. It only really becomes obvious in the purest, most stable, and kind of the most extreme things in nature. So if you look at this chart, you can see that in a pure state, like a specific virus, the E8 shape is totally visible. But as you go down towards more messy, chaotic stuff like hot plasma, that beautiful pattern gets hidden. It's still there, but it's lost in the noise. Okay, this is where it gets really, really cool. Let's go on a little journey through the scales and see the evidence for ourselves. And we're going to start super, super small, at the scale of life itself. So our first piece of evidence is something you've probably heard of, the adenovirus. It's a pretty common virus, but it turns out its structure is holding on to a massive secret, a clue that points to this much deeper cosmic truth. And that clue boils down to this one number, 240. Yeah, I know, it seems totally random, doesn't it? But trust me, it's not. This is our first real hint that connects biology to some seriously deep mathematics. And boom, here it is. This is the moment that should make you sit up a little straighter. The outer shell of the adenovirus is built from exactly 240 little proteins. Now get this. The mathematical structure of E8 is defined by exactly 240 fundamental components called roots. This isn't close. It's not an approximation. It is a perfect one-to-one match. A virus and a piece of abstract math are speaking the exact same language. And it's not just in viruses. The very instant that a new life begins, that calcium wave that sweeps across an egg when it's fertilized, it moves in a perfect spiral. This kind of stable, self-perpetuating spiral is called a topological soliton. Think of it like a knot in a rope that can travel down the rope without ever untying itself. It's a stable pattern of pressure, and yep, it's described by the very same underlying math. Okay, so we've seen the evidence down at the microscopic level. Now, let's zoom out. And I mean way out. We're going to leave the world of cells and viruses behind and see if this pattern holds up on the cosmic stage.
Our next stop on this tour is right here at home, planet Earth. You'd think we know everything there is to know about our own planet, but a pretty recent discovery has shown us something really profound about what we're made of.
So it turns out Earth is incredibly pure. Geologically speaking, almost all of its material came from the inner solar system. Now, according to pressure geometry, that's no accident. That's exactly what you'd expect. The theory says the universe always prefers the most stable, most pure configurations, what it calls a bound-invariant state. So Earth itself is a planetary-scale example of this principle at work.
All right, now for the grand finale of our evidence tour, the most extreme, the most violent, the most brain-breaking example we have. It's a magnetar, the super-dense corpse of a star that was spotted in a recent supernova. This thing is pushing physics to its absolute limit.
And it is spinning at an absolutely blistering but incredibly precise speed, 238 times every single second. Okay, so again, we have a number, it seems random, but by now you're probably guessing it's anything but. And this is just, wow, this is so cool. Remember the number from the virus, 240. That's a key number in the math of E8. This star is spinning at 238. So what happened to the other two? Well, the mathematics of E8 actually predicts that when its perfect symmetry breaks and settles into a slightly less perfect but more stable state, exactly 2 of its components disappear. So the magnetar spin isn't just a number, it's a fossil, an imprint of E8 breaking its symmetry. 240 minus 2, it's right there. So let's just take a second and look at this all together. This slide is really the whole story in one picture. From the 240-unit shell of a tiny virus, to the spiral wave of fertilization, to the rhythm of your own heart, to a hurricane, all the way up to a magnetar and the spiraling arms of our own galaxy. It's the same patterns, the same spirals, the same stable shells showing up over and over and over again across scales that are almost impossible to comprehend. It's just breathtaking. So, if this is real, if there really is one pattern that rules everything, what does it actually mean for us, for how we see the universe? Well, the implications they're huge. It means this. The fundamental pressure that stops a black hole from crushing itself down into an infinitely tiny point is the very same force that kicks off a new life in a fertilized egg. The universe is using the same trick to prevent total collapse and to create brand new life. One force, governing both ends of existence. So let's just boil it down to 3 massive takeaways. First, singularities, like the center of a black hole, are basically impossible. The math just doesn't allow for them. Second, the universe isn't totally random. It has a built-in preference for pure, stable states, and we see that everywhere, from planets to viruses. And maybe the biggest one of all, third, life isn't just some random chemical accident. It might be an inevitable consequence of the universe's fundamental geometry.
Which leaves us with one last thought to chew on. For all of human history, we've looked up at the stars to understand the cosmos. But what if we've been looking in the wrong place? What if the deepest laws of reality aren't written out there in the vastness of space, but in the invisible geometry of pressure that shapes everything from the inside out? What if the universe is not just stranger than we imagine, but stranger than we can imagine?